arms with each other, support each other. Every single issue concerns us, even if it doesn't affect us directly.
Between Bryant Park and Times Square, the Midtown South Community Council held its second annual Communities Together Festival of Music and Activism. We hope you liked this recap of music and speeches. Would you like to see a third Communities Together this year in 2026? Let us know, and sign up for our emails.
Small town blues are melting away. I'll make a brand new start of it, oh yeah, in old New York. If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. It's up to you. A New York, New York. Here we go now, kick 'em up. Oh, New York, so bad they named it twice. I want to wake up in the city that never sleeps. Oh yeah.
Let's give a round of applause to Chris Marte. Thank you for being here, Chris. We really appreciate you. Well, let's give it up to John and the Midtown South Community Council for all they do. Midtown South Community Council, we really appreciate the decades of activism, organizing, and making change here, pretty much in the capital center of our country and probably the world. And it's people that are here today. I know I'm kicking things off, and so everyone's not here, but every single table today are fighting for social justice. Whether it's anti-displacement campaigns, protecting healthcare plans, making sure that people who don't have a voice, are most vulnerable, can stand up, fight, take to the streets. But more importantly, after today, we meet each other, we learn about each other's struggles, work together, and make change, right? Because if we don't make the change, if we don't make the change that we want, then it doesn't matter. And so today, I'm here because there's a number of fights I've been fighting with a lot of people who are here today. The first one is anti-displacement. On the Lower East Side in Chinatown, where I was born and raised and now I'm lucky to represent, we've been fighting against developers. And many people always say, how can you fight against the wealthiest stakeholders in New York City and win? Well, let me tell you a story about two bridges. Before I took office, the former councilwoman and developers got together to build 4 massive luxury towers. One tower was going to be on top of a senior affordable housing development. That's shameful. And when I took office, they said this was a done deal. But what we did on the first day was organize. We met with the tenants, we met with anti-displacement organizers, and we rallied, filed lawsuits, and now, 4 years later, the developers still can't develop because we've been fighting. And so when there's a will, when there's people, when they're willing to give it them all and take to the streets, they can win. My office for the past 4 years have helped thousands of people on smaller scales fight against their landlord. Whether it's going with them to housing court, sending letters to some of these portfolio companies, private equity firms that are trying to take over our buildings. And we've been able to win every single time because people have been on the right side of history and willing to stand up and speak for themselves, but more importantly, speak for their neighbors. A second fight I've been fighting is with New York City retirees. There are 250,000 municipal retirees, not just here, but throughout this country. And during the de Blasio administration, he started to collude with some of the biggest unions and insurance companies to shift retiree health care to a privatized Medicare Advantage program. If anyone has read anything about Medicare Advantage, we all know it's a massive disadvantage, where people don't get treatment, where people get denied for their claims, where people live in fear. If they fall, they might not get help from the doctor that's been helping them for decades. And so when people said this was a done deal, when they said that's it, they already picked the insurance company, Aetna. All of the big unions are already on board. The administration's on board. You know who wasn't on board? The retirees. They kept on fighting day after day. They filed close to 12 lawsuits and won. But more importantly, they found partners in the council to work with them. First, it was my man Charles Barron from East New York. We all know and love Charles Barron. But as the new crop of council kept on coming, we increased the coalition that we have. And when Charles Barron stepped aside, I decided to take on 1096 and reintroduce it. And I gotta tell you how big the special interests were. They wouldn't even allow me to introduce a bill in the city council. It wasn't asking for a hearing, it wasn't asking for a vote, it was asking to give people an opportunity to introduce a bill. They did whatever they could to stop me from doing that. But we still pushed forward and did something super unconventional where we actually brought the bill from the floor of the city council and introduced it ourselves. But we didn't stop there. We organized around Mayor Adams, Speaker Adams, and recently, this past summer, Mayor Adams decided to stop moving forward with the Medicare Advantage plan. It was a major victory because people thought he was immovable. He was bought off. But again, when you have the power of the people willing not to give up, we can win. But it's not over. We all know we have to pass 1096, codify it in law, and make sure that this fight doesn't happen again 10 years down the road in another administration. And I got some good news. We had a town hall with our next mayor. I know I can't be too political on here. Potential next mayor, Zoran Mandami. And at a town hall, he said he is not going to support Medicare Advantage, and he's going to work to protect the retirees and their health care plan. Another major win for our community and for the city of New York. This shows the power of events like this. This shows people gathering, working together, and I gotta tell you, many people in those retiree rallies were home attendants, fighting for their own work protection, their back wages. There are some of the other people, anti-displacement organizations like Youth Against Displacement. It just shows that your fight is my fight, it's our fight. And so I'm happy to be here to kick off this market of ideas, of community, to bring people together, learn from each other, organize, but more importantly, win. Thank you all.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. This is the perfect blog to have these kinds of conversations. This is amazing. So thank you to the organizers for putting these events together. We need to be able to have these conversations because what we experience in New York City over and over and over is actually people who make decisions that they will never have to live with. They don't live in our city, they're lobbyists, they're developers, they live in their enclaves, and they're pushing an agenda that does not work for the working class New Yorkers. Quick examples. We have a project to demolish 24 public housing buildings, and they would be replaced with super tall towers that would put, for example, our local elementary school in the shadows. These people who are making these decisions, they're not going to have to live with it. They don't have children who go to these schools. We do, and we need to shift that. We need to shift this imbalance. The city should grow. We are pro-growth, the type of growth that benefits the people, that benefits residents. We are pro-growth, but we are anti-capture. We don't want the wealth of New York City to be accapared by a happy few. We are for redistribution. We are for more equity. And also, we don't want and we will not tolerate that decisions are made for us, but without us. This is what participatory democracy means. We have a seat at the table, and you know what they say? If you don't have a seat at the table, it probably means that you're on the menu. And in Chelsea, in Midtown, in the entire Manhattan, in the entire city of New York, we are not interested in being on the menu. We want a seat at the table. So what are we asking for? And you've heard from many speakers, and they spoke about transportation, they spoke about public housing, they spoke about healthcare, and they're basically saying and telling the same story. It is the same dynamic, and over exertion of influence and power by special interests, by corporations, by lobbyists, and it is leaving real New Yorkers, people like you and me, out of the equation. The city is becoming unaffordable. Come on, a cappuccino that is $7, a cup of coffee that is, like exorbitant. This is not the way New York should be. So what are we asking for? We want a participatory democracy. We want independent community boards. We want our city council members to be able to continue to represent us. And we want them with the ability to represent us to do exactly that. Because in case you didn't notice, if there's a project that comes our way and we don't like it, very often we're told we're too loud. As if when there's something that really these communities don't want, we're supposed to whisper. But at the same time, money from special influence swears. It doesn't whisper. A $1.9 billion project to demolish public housing, this is swearing with money. And when these communities are rising and objecting to a plan that is absolutely atrocious and that would cause displacement, we're told we're too loud. Excuse me, we're gonna get even louder. Let's make sure that we get this memo out. We're not gonna sit down, we're not gonna back down. We want community boards that are independent, city council members who represent their communities. We want a seat at the table. Right? Right? Wouldn't you think that this is common sense? Why do we even have to say it? This is in our charter, this is in our bylaws, this is in our constitution. But you know what? What do we see? When people have a lot of money, they get lobbyists. When we have a lot of people, we get a movement. And what are we here for? For exactly that. This is a movement. My ask to you is lock arms with each other, support each other. Every single issue concerns us, even if it doesn't affect us directly. Healthcare, housing, transportation, independence, transparency. It is our issue, jointly. Let's join forces. This is what this event is about. This is what this movement is about. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here this morning. It's important that we come together as a community to build our collective power and push back on a system that is pushing down on us. I'm going to start out with a central theme of my talk. And our struggle in this country, whether it be for health care, whether it be for food security, whether it be for child care, whether it be for housing, whether it be for public housing, is a fight for land, folks. We have to change our fundamental relationship to land. We know that land as a commodity does not work for a majority of communities in the U.S. So how do I come to that conclusion? Well, I learned from a social movement in the Global South. I work constantly with two social movements there. The landless workers movement in Brazil, known as the MST, and I work with the movement of people affected by dams in Brazil. They're building a high number of electric dams, hydroelectric dams, forcing people off land. A family may have been a farming community, had land that they had title to that was fertile land. All of a sudden you move to the other side of a river, your land isn't fertile anymore, your water is polluted. How do you grow food and how do you sustain yourselves? But I looked at the landless workers movement when I was doing the work of Take Back the Land post-foreclosure crisis. And just to put this in context, Take Back the Land was a movement that says, you can't have our tax money banks and the houses too. So the Obama administration had taken our tax dollars and basically sent a message to us that it's okay for you to fail, but Bank of America, Citibank, Chase, they can't fail, but you can fail. Then those banks started foreclosing and evicting us in record numbers. We at Take Back the Land to organize ourselves said you can't have the houses and the money too. So we're gonna take back our houses. And what we did, we found houses that were foreclosed by a bank or a government agency. We broke in them, we moved the families back in there and defended their rights to be in there using international human rights law and standards. So as I think about the MST, and I learned about their movement and I started studying their movement. Brazil has a constitution written post-dictatorship 1985, as opposed to our 250-year-old constitution that says property rights. Brazil's constitution says land has to serve a social purpose or function. Growing food or housing people. What a fucking novel idea, eh? Wow, incredible. You know, so it's thinking about the people. So we come to this point where the MST are landless workers that are living on the periphery of big cities, traveling an hour, hour and a half each day to work, each direction, to and from work, and passing open swaths of land. So they decided that they'd organize themselves, and the men would move the women and children on a piece of vacant land, settle them down, and the men would work the land and plant food overnight. In the morning, when daylight came, they'd find bamboo, which was plentiful in Brazil, and build an abode. All of a sudden, they have housing because they got access to land. But guess what? More people came, and all of a sudden, you start to build a community. So when I go to work, John watches my children. When John goes to work, I watch John's children. Childcare problems disappeared. They disappeared. Then all of a sudden more people come, and there's some knowledgeable person that knows how to take a certain root or plant and heal the sick by boiling down that plant and making some sort of broth that's going to heal the sick. The healthcare problems disappeared, right? So I came to a conclusion that land is central to our struggle. And it's been a struggle for me ever since, trying to understand how in a city like this, where we're surrounded by these large structures, how do we get community control of land? Well, there is a table here from a group called the New Economy Project that is working on something, a model called Community Land Trust, which would take land, give land to people in perpetuity, and keep housing affordable, because the housing built on it was cooperative or mutual housing. I sit on the board of directors of Cooper Square Community Land Trust, one of the largest land trusts in New York City, right? And it's the model for everybody. So we have to think fundamentally how we relate ourselves to land. Right now we have a big issue in this country, the issue, and particularly in the city, the issue of homelessness. Now I don't know who knows me, who doesn't. I spent 2.5 years on the streets of Miami homeless and 10 months in a New York City homeless shelter. I now teach graduate students at the New School, and I work with a human rights organization called Partners for Dignity and Rights. So my life has changed. It's not so easy for everybody else, and I realize that. And that's why I'm very public about what happened to me, because it transformed me. Being homeless let me see that the flaws of the world, and particularly of this city. So as I read to you on Friday night from New York City's daily shelter census, there were 85,638 people in New York City shelters. Of that, 23,100 were single adults, and 62,539 made up families. That's a problem, folks. That's a problem because we have 600 shelters, and the shelter industrial complex just keeps going and growing and growing. It is run by not-for-profit organizations, but I make the argument that somebody's profiting, because every time a big mouth like mine comes forward and speaks out about it, they look at me and they say, "Rob, why are you so against shelter? You benefited from the shelter." Yeah, I did benefit. I got inside, I saw the problems that were. Now it's my job to deconstruct the shelter system and this industrial complex that is existing in New York City. 600 of them, folks. That's a problem. The problem is led by a policy in the city called the right to shelter. You have a right on any given night in New York City to go to the government and say, "I need a shelter bed." And the city has an obligation to give you a shelter bed. So the city passed that job off to not-for-profit organizations, and they get big fat contracts in the city. They ain't trying to let that shit go away. They ain't trying to give up that money. So we're gonna have to break it down. So how do we break it down? I'm working with a group right now called the Human Right to Housing, folks, the Human Right to Housing campaign, right? Because I believe in a human right to housing, right? A human right to housing doesn't mean you get a shelter bed every night. It means you have a sense of community around you. It means you live in a dignified place with security of tenure. There are a lot of things, there are 7 key items that lead to a right to housing. And several of us are fighting for that in New York City. So at this current time, I think we have a problem with homelessness, and here's a bigger reason. Not only the shelter industrial complex, I mentioned one policy, there's another policy called Housing First that the not-for-profit organizations are pushing back on. Housing First means you take a person off the street and immediately put them in the housing and surround them with any necessary social services. I understand people have disabilities, mental disabilities on the street, but we have a way, if we're human, we have a way to deal with that, right? So we have to show our humanity. Housing First is being pushed back in this city. Not only in the city, in this country, we have an idea that I gotta fix you first before I give you a house. So I gotta make you go through a program. I gotta make you jump through hoops to prove that you're worthy of a house. That's problematic, folks.